A king was killed by his own pet lion. This is not a legend, but a historical account that forces us to question everything we think we know about power and control. In the ancient world, rulers surrounded themselves with wild beasts as living symbols of their authority. Creatures of immense strength, kept docile to prove a king's dominion over nature itself. But what happens when that illusion of control shatters in the most brutal way possible? By the end of this story, you will uncover the hidden truths behind one of history's most bizarre royal tragedies. We will investigate whether this was a simple accident, a calculated murder, or a story crafted for a hidden purpose. Why would a creature bred for loyalty turn on its master so violently? Our story unfolds in the 1st century before the Common Era, in the rugged highlands of the Parthian Empire. This was a realm spanning the ancient Silk Roads, a place of immense power and constant political intrigue. At its helm was King Tiridates I, a monarch whose very name meant given by the god Tur, a clear declaration of his divine right to rule. His kingdom, located in what we now know as Iran, was a prize fiercely contested, caught between the ambitions of Rome in the west and rival empires in the east. To rule here required not just political cunning, but an unshakable display of strength, and for Tiridates, that strength was symbolized by a lion. In Parthian culture, the lion was far more than a wild animal. It was a living emblem of royal authority, a creature representing raw courage, sovereignty, and a direct connection to the divine. A king who could keep a lion by his side was making a powerful statement. He was demonstrating his absolute command over the most untamable forces of nature, a metaphor for his control over his restless kingdom. So, within the royal court, amidst the whispers of advisors and the splendor of wealth, the lion would have been a constant, majestic presence. It was the ultimate status symbol, a breathing piece of propaganda. The king's subjects and his enemies would look upon this powerful beast lying docile at the ruler's feet and see a man whose power was so complete, even nature itself bowed to his will. This carefully crafted image of control, over both his human domain and his animal companion, set the stage for a tragedy that would shatter the illusion forever. The tranquility of the royal court was shattered in an instant. According to the Roman historian Justin, the event was sudden and brutal. One moment, the king was in the presence of his majestic lion, a scene of power and control that was routine. The next, the animal turned on him. We can only reconstruct the probable scene from the fragments of history. Perhaps it was during a routine feeding, where a moment of miscommunication broke the fragile bond between man and beast. Maybe the lion perceived a sudden movement interpreted as a challenge to its dominance. Or it could have been a simple, tragic misstep by the king, an accidental invasion of the animal's space that triggered its deepest instincts. The specific catalyst is lost to time, but the outcome was horrifically clear. The lion attacked its master with devastating force. The carefully maintained illusion of the king's dominion over nature evaporated in a few violent moments, leaving only chaos and bloodshed in its wake. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of shock and horror. Courtiers and guards who had grown accustomed to the lion's imposing presence would have been frozen, then thrown into a panicked scramble. Their divine ruler, the man chosen by the gods, lay dead by the jaws of his own living symbol of power. In the confusion, the fate of the lion was almost certainly a swift and brutal execution. It was not just an animal that had killed a man, it was a symbol that had destroyed the very king it was meant to glorify. It had to be erased, but even more pressing than the dead beast was the vacuum of power it left behind. With the king suddenly gone, the court would have descended into a frantic, hushed struggle. Alliances shifted in whispers. Advisors and generals began maneuvering, each hoping to seize control before the news could spread and destabilize the entire kingdom. The tragedy was not just a personal loss, it was a profound political earthquake. What makes this event so perplexing for historians is the stark lack of detail. Justin's account is brief, a mere mention in a much larger historical work. There were no forensic investigations, no detailed court records of the attack's mechanics. Historians are left with a stark fact: a king was killed by his pet lion, and must piece together the how and the why from this single sentence. This scarcity of information is what transforms a historical account into a true mystery. We are left with so many unanswered questions. Was the lion truly a loyal companion that simply snapped, or was there something more calculated at play? The gaps in the story are where the real intrigue begins, forcing us to look beyond the simple tale of an animal attack and consider the human hands that may have been involved. But can we trust this story of a king slain by his beast? Our only source is a Roman writer named Justin, who compiled an epitome of the Philippic history of Pompeius Trogus. His account is a brief summary of a much larger, now lost work, and it was written from the perspective of Rome, the great rival of the Parthian Empire. This is where our skepticism must kick in. The Romans had a vested interest in portraying their eastern enemies as unstable, barbaric, and ultimately illegitimate. What better way to undermine a so-called divine king than to tell a story where his own symbol of power literally turns on him and destroys him? This single source forces us to consider other, more sinister possibilities. Was the lion's attack merely a convenient cover for a well-planned assassination? Imagine a rival faction within the court secretly agitating the animal, or perhaps even drugging it, to stage a murder that looked like a tragic accident. The lion becomes the perfect murder weapon, leaving no human assassin to interrogate and creating a story so bizarre it defies immediate suspicion. Alternatively, the entire event could be a work of pure political propaganda, fabricated by Roman historians or even by Parthian rivals who seized power after the king's death. By spreading the tale of the king's grotesque end, they could argue that the gods had withdrawn their favor, that the ruler was so unfit that even nature itself had revolted against him. Modern historians are deeply divided on this point. Some see the core of the story as too strange not to be true, while others point to the complete lack of corroborating evidence from Parthian sources themselves. This transforms a simple tragedy into a complex historical puzzle. We are left weighing a bizarre accident against a calculated regicide, all filtered through the biased lens of a rival empire. The truth is buried not just under the sands of time, but under layers of political motive and ancient spin. King Tiridates was not alone in his desire to surround himself with wild power. Across the ancient world, rulers sought to embody their authority through the mastery of dangerous creatures. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus, for instance, was said to chariot through the streets of Rome with lions and tigers harnessed to his carriage, a spectacle designed to shock and awe his subjects. These animals were never just pets. They were living, breathing symbols. A lion represented courage and sovereignty. An eagle signified divine favor and imperial reach. To control such a creature was to project an image of unshakable command over the natural world, a direct reflection of a king's control over his people. This is why the attack on Tiridates would have been interpreted as far more than a simple accident. In the ancient mindset, such an event was a profound omen. If a king's own symbolic beast turned against him, it could only mean one thing. The gods had withdrawn their favor. The divine right to rule had been violently revoked. The lion was not merely an animal that snapped. It became an instrument of divine judgment, a message that the dynasty was crumbling from within. This taps into a timeless narrative, the idea of pride before a fall. A ruler, at the peak of his power, believes he can subjugate the untamable forces of nature itself. He places his trust in a symbol of raw, wild strength, only to be destroyed by the very thing he thought he controlled. It is a powerful philosophical lesson on the futility of absolute dominion. We see this theme echoed in countless myths and stories, from Icarus flying too close to the sun to modern tales of technology overthrowing its creator. The story of King Tiridates and his lion is a stark, historical example of this eternal conflict. It forces us to ask whether any ruler, no matter how powerful, can truly conquer the wildness of the world, or if such attempts inevitably lead to a tragic and symbolic downfall. The death of King Tiridates stands as a haunting echo from the ancient world, a story suspended between a bizarre accident and a calculated crime. We are left with a king slain by his own living symbol of power, a narrative preserved only through the lens of his empire's greatest rival. The truth is buried beneath layers of political spin and the passage of centuries. leaving us to wonder if this was the random violence of a wild animal, a cleverly disguised assassination, or a piece of masterful propaganda designed to disgrace a fallen dynasty. Whatever the reality, the story's enduring power lies in its stark symbolism. It is a timeless lesson on the illusion of control, a reminder that the forces we believe we have mastered, whether in nature or in the hearts of men, can turn in an instant. The most dangerous threat to a king may not have been the lion in his court, but the fragile nature of his own authority. So what do you believe happened in that Parthian palace? Was it a tragic mishap, a murder plotted by human rivals, or a legendary tale crafted to teach a moral lesson? Share your theory in the comments below. We would love to hear your perspective. If you were captivated by this journey into a historical mystery, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more investigations into the forgotten corners of our past.